Hey everyone, this is Mike from Firefighter Now. Welcome back to video number 2. This video is going to be about the 7 mistakes frequently made by firefighter candidates. And if you missed video 1, where we went over the importance of the interview and the 3 best ways that I know of and the 3 best ways that I use to prepare for my interviews, you can go ahead and click the links and go back and watch it. If you haven't, I would highly recommend it. It was very helpful to a lot of people. A lot of the feedback I got on it was great. So go ahead and take a minute and go back and watch the first video. But if not, we're going to get started with this video today. Like I said, what we're going to learn today, we're going to be going over the top 7 mistakes candidates make. Now, these are all too common, and some of them you might look at and say, people actually do that? And yeah, you'd be surprised. You'd be amazed at some of the things people do before their interview to prepare and during their interview and how they show up. We're also going to talk about why these mistakes are so lethal to your chances of getting hired. They can absolutely kill your chances. And some of the mistakes might not necessarily kill your chances, but it won't make you stand out, and it certainly isn't going to help your ability to get hired. So we're going to talk about the mistakes, why they can kill your chances of getting hired, and finally the most important part, we're going to be going over the solutions, how to fix these mistakes before they even happen, and what to be aware of going into the interview or while you're in the interview and how to avoid them. A quick recap, like I said in the last video, we went over why the interview is so important. This is so important because it's their first impression of you. First impressions are really, really hard to change. So you want this first time that these officers see you to be a great way for them to remember you. We also talked about the 3 best ways to prepare. We went over the watching yourself in the mirror. So checking your body language, seeing how you present while you're answering questions. Then we went over recording yourself and listening to how you speak, how many filler words you use, and timing yourself and seeing how long it takes you to answer pretty basic questions. And then finally, we went over the importance of the mock interview, where you kind of bring it all together and you actually sit across from another individual who asks you questions, where you're working on your body language, your delivery, your tone, your timing of your answers, and all those kind of things. You kind of bring it all together in the mock interview. And finally, in the last video, we kind of went over a little bit of who I am and why I started Firefighter Now, why I created this video. So a quick recap on me in case you missed it. I am a full-time firefighter and paramedic for a small department just on the west side of Cleveland, Ohio. And I created Firefighter Now to create the absolute best resources out there for aspiring firefighters. Listen, when I started with no clue, and I made a lot of mistakes and had to learn from experience. I remember when I was testing and taking all the different civil service tests and going through the physical agility exams, getting ready for my interviews, all the resources I found out there were extremely vague or didn't really give a whole lot of insight. So I created Firefighter Now, and I created this course to help people like yourself, people that have had a lifelong goal or a lifelong dream of working in the fire service and helping other people, to give you resources where you know what to expect and you know how to prepare the right way. You see, because when I started, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody in the fire service. I didn't have a family history of firefighters or firefighting or anything like that, so I didn't know what the culture was like. And like I have written here, I learned from experience. Before I got into fire, I thought I wanted to be a police officer, so I took some police tests, and I was an absolute disaster in my interviews, and I bombed a lot of them. And I thought I had a great resume, and I thought I did well on the tests, and I did, but I learned from experience that the interview is what broke me as a candidate. So I was able to transition what I learned from all of my law enforcement interviews over to my fire interviews, and kind of regrouped and practiced. And of all the 4 interviews I got offered 4 jobs, so I was 4 for 4 in my fire interviews. So I know what works, and I know what's expected of a good fire candidate and what puts you at the top of the list. So enough talking about me. Let's get into the mistakes and what to look out for and how to prepare for it. Mistake number 1, and these are in no particular order of importance, except I did save the best for last and probably the most important one you want to keep in mind when preparing for your interview. But starting out, mistake number 1 I have is using generic or canned answers, as I like to call them. Generic answers would be things that would fall under the category of, if they ask you, why do you want to be a firefighter? If your answer is simply, well, because I want to help people, that's a great answer, but that's a generic answer. That doesn't give them any specifics about you or any insights into you and who you are and why you're there or anything like that. What they want to find out is what makes you unique and memorable. Remember, these are extremely competitive jobs. You'll be going up against dozens and maybe even hundreds of other candidates. You need to do something to stand out, because everybody that walks into that room to interview, I guarantee you, will say, I want to be a firefighter because I want to help people. Great. So what makes you stand out? So you want to avoid generic answers as much as you can, and being able to avoid those is actually taking the time to sit down and write down what makes you unique as a candidate and what makes you better than everybody else and what would make you a better rookie firefighter for this particular department. So take the time and sit down and write those things out. Mistake number 2, looking sloppy. This is a business professional environment and you need to dress like it. I get it. The fire service and law enforcement too is different than your typical job interview that you'll go to. However, that doesn't mean that khakis and a polo shirt or jeans and a t-shirt, God forbid, is acceptable. You need to be wearing a suit. You need to be wearing business professional clothes. If you're a guy, wear a tie. If you're a girl, wear a pantsuit or a skirt and a nice blouse. You have to look good when you show up at this interview. That's easy to fix. Go buy yourself a suit. Go buy yourself a tie. It's worth the investment. And even after the interview's over, you'll need the suit or you'll need the skirt or the dress clothes later on in life. So make the investment in yourself and get it now. Mistake number 3, don't be rude even by mistake. So a lot of people don't really think about this. When the day of your interview comes, you're going to be nervous, and you should, because this is a big deal. But don't get so focused and worried about your answers and did I prepare enough or what are they going to ask me or this, that, or the other thing, that when you walk into that building, you're going to be coming in contact with other firefighters. You're going to be coming in contact with possibly other officers, or maybe some secretarial staff or dispatch staff or maybe janitorial staff. You might even run into some government officials, maybe city council people or the mayor or something like that. Don't get so caught up in your own world and thinking so much about your answers and did I show up on time? Am I prepared? This, that, and the other thing, that you forget to look people in the eye and shake their hand. Say, hello, how are you? My name's Mike. It's nice to meet you. You need to treat everyone like they're the chief of the department. In an article I wrote for Fire Rescue 1, I talk about how if the chief were to greet you at the door, would you shake his hand or her hand and say, hi, my name's whatever your name is, it's nice to meet you? Of course you would. So you need to extend that same courtesy to everybody else that you come across. And that comes from 2 things. 1 is preparation and knowing that you've prepared properly. And 2, just taking a breath, relaxing, and knowing that it's going to be okay and you prepared the right way. Mistake number 4, and this is so obvious I feel like I shouldn't have to say it, but unfortunately it still happens. Don't be late. Being on time for a fire interview does not mean showing up at the slotted time. So if let's say for example, your interview is at 11 a.m., showing up at 10:59 or 11 a.m. is not on time. You need to be there a minimum of 15 minutes before your slotted start time. So you need to be walking in that door at 10:45 in the morning. Why so early, you might ask? Well, it gives you time to get set, figure out where you're going, go to the bathroom if you need to, because in the middle of your interview, you don't want to stand up and say, oh, can we hold on for just a second? I got to go to the bathroom. It gives you time to acclimate yourself to the environment you're going to be in. And who knows, like I said, maybe you'll run into some of the other firefighters. They'll come up and introduce themselves to you. You get the chance to kind of talk with them a little bit while you're waiting for your time. So do not be late. Mistake number 5. Don't bring up the perks of the job. So there's a lot of perks to being a firefighter, and a lot of people are very sensitive. A lot of people in the fire community are very sensitive about people wanting to get into the fire service for good pay or benefits or lots of time off. They want to know that you're there for the right reasons. So before we go any further, let me be the first to tell you that whatever your reasons are completely fine. Whatever brought you to the fire service, whatever made you want to be a firefighter, that's exclusively your reason. That's up to you. However, when you're in the interview and they start asking you questions, don't bring those things up. If they give you the opportunity at the end of the interview to ask them questions, don't ask what's the starting pay. Again, that sounds so blatantly obvious, but you'd be amazed at some of the things people go into these interviews and do. If they ask you, why do you want to be a firefighter? Don't say, so I have lots of time off to work a second job. That's not a good answer. Whatever you do, do not bring up the perks of the job. Mistake number 6. Have some follow-up questions in mind. And so this is kind of controversial with some of the other people out there that help prepare firefighter candidates for their interviews or any sort of test prep things out there, some people say that you shouldn't ask any follow-up questions. And it's kind of the mindset of you speak when spoken to. When your interview's done, you stand up and you leave. They're not interested in answering any of your questions. I'm going to disagree. And I'm going to say that it's important to have follow-up questions because it makes you look very prepared, that you did some research on the department ahead of time, and it makes you look like you're interested in the department. Now, where you need to be careful is you don't want to ask them too many questions. My rule is you want to stick to 2 questions, definitely no more than 3. If you start to ask too many questions at the end of the interview to the panel or to whoever else is there, it makes it kind of seem like you're kind of interviewing them, where I'm here to interview for your department, but let me ask you a few questions before we go any further. That's not the vibe you want to give off. And if you ask too many questions, it's just risky. So stick with 2 questions. Do your research on the department ahead of time. Find out what the department's like, the size of the department, and ask your questions based on the research that you've done. Mistake number 7, and this is by far the single biggest mistake people make when getting ready for your interview, is they underestimate the importance of it. So that being said, you need to practice your answers, your delivery, your timing, everything. Practice till you are sick of it, and then practice some more. I cannot emphasize this enough. When I was going through the process with some of these police departments, I totally underestimated the importance of the interview. And like I said, I didn't get hired at a single one of those departments simply because I was terrible in the interview. I wasn't prepared. I got asked questions that were pretty basic and pretty simple, and I didn't have good answers. And I think there was even one time where I was asked, do you know the roles and responsibilities of someone on this department? And I answered their question with a question. I mean, you cannot do that. You have to go in there knowing exactly what you're going to say, exactly what makes you stand out from the other candidates. So the biggest mistake you can make is underestimating the importance of the interview and not practicing. So to wrap all this up, I know I went through these kind of quick, but let's go over the 7 mistakes again. Using generic answers, you have to stand out. You have to be unique and memorable. This job is just simply too competitive to just go in there with generic answers and expect to get hired. Looking sloppy, look good. This is a business professional environment, and you have to look the part. Don't be rude. Don't get so caught up in yourself and worrying about how you look and how you're going to answer and how well you did with your preparation that you forget to be courteous and forget the basics of shaking people's hand and looking people in the eye and asking them how they're doing. 4th, don't be late. I know I've said it before. I feel like I shouldn't even have to say that, but unfortunately there's still people that do that. So do not be late. 5, don't talk about the perks of the job. Whatever your reasons are for being in the fire department or wanting to be a part of a fire department is fine. It's completely fine. I'm not going to be one of these people that tell you have to have a family history or whatever. Whatever your reasons are fine. Just don't bring up the perks during the interview. Number 6, be ready with follow-up questions. I think that makes you look good. It makes you look like you're on the ball and that you're interested in being a part of their department. And finally, practice. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. You are going to be nervous, and you're probably going to get asked some questions that you might not even be prepared for. So you have to practice leading up to this interview. In the next video, we're going to be going over some of the most common questions I get from firefighter candidates. So I talk to all sorts of aspiring firefighters. I get emails from them, speak to them in person, speak to them over the phone, and I get a lot of the similar questions. Questions like, hey, I have a DUI in my background. How am I supposed to deal with that? Can I still get hired? I'm competing against hundreds of other candidates. How can I stand out from the rest of them? Or I don't know what my skills are that I'm supposed to bring up. What can I talk about? So we're going to be covering questions like that and how to get through that and how to prepare for when you do get asked those questions. But before we end this video, I want to hear from you. Go ahead and click below and like the video. Share this with as many people as you possibly can. Write down some mistakes that maybe you've made, or maybe you can identify with, or maybe something that you're worried about happening, or maybe a story you heard about somebody that made this mistake and how it ended for them. I'd love to hear back from you guys. I've been getting great feedback on the last video, and I'd like to keep it going with this one, so click below to like and share it with as many people as you can. So keep an eye on your inbox, and I will see you very soon in video 3.